understand, so from a personal perspective, how you feel about organisations who proactively kind of announce a drive for Black heritage candidates.
Again, it comes back down to the why for me. But actively saying out loud is a good thing. It's never going to be a bad thing. That would encourage people to go and find out why. And then everyone's why is different. So you might be happy with their why. You may not be. But what you can then do is just do your own research and then decide if it's a company or an environment that you want to put yourself into. So I wish it would be more specific. If I'm honest with you, it'd be easier to cut through using the wrong language and being, very discreet about stuff. Like, just say what it is you want and why. The why is very important. And then let's do it.
They've announced it. So they've said, great, we want more Black heritage candidates. And then Monique, as that candidate where you've then applied for a role, you've been successful, do you feel like you're there because of your merit? Or would you then feel as though you've ticked a box that organisation was on a recruitment drive for more people that look like you?
I think that's where it comes down into how you feel and what you hear. Because usually if it is a tick box, it will come to light quite quickly in terms of how you're treated. And I think a key thing to check in on, do I have equity of voice? So in that level that you're being brought into the organisation, am I being heard? Am I being asked? Am I being invited? Do I have space? Is my voice heard? I think that is absolutely crucial. That will answer a lot for you about whether it's tick box or whether we genuinely want diversity because we want to represent our community that we serve. And we also want diversity of voice and thought. We don't have that because it's all groupthink. It's same here. I think that's a crucial thing. Do I have equity of voice?
As a recruitment and inclusion consultancy business, there is nothing that delights me more than when I'm working with organisations who really, truly come to me and say, Christina, please help. We need to increase representation from underserved communities, primarily. And so what that typically looks like really is Black heritage and gender. They are the two things that most organisations have got a spotlight on the moment. So for us, it doesn't give us greater joy than really kind of uncovering all of the stones and finding that talent for clients in the market. I think when there's a bit of a disconnection for me is when organizations are saying, we really, really want Black talent. And the person that I'm dealing with, so the hiring manager, that has trickled down from HR. That's trickled down from what the CEO wants. And so you've got somebody who's placed in the organization that is still operating on an academic level. It's not a heartfelt of, I want my team to innovate. I want us to be the best team we can be. It's solely from I've got to answer to these guys at the end of the quarter and demonstrate that I've had a diverse candidate slate, demonstrate that I've interviewed 5 Black people.
KPIs.
And it's KPIs. And so so what we're met with is staggeringly still in this day and age is we will meet with an organization who are doing some really good work in the DI space because it's something that we assess as a business before we work with a company. So we have a manifesto. We will only onboard clients that we think are wholly aligned with our vision. And that is to innovate and it is to drive inclusion. So not an agenda of only looking at one underserved group, but it's how can we be better? How can we do it from a societal perspective, organizational and personal, right? That's really important to us as a business. So when I sit down with a hiring manager, what I recently had was 4 weeks into a search where they wanted a Black heritage candidate. And it was during a holiday time. It was a holiday period in the year. So most people off traveling, they were like, right, we're going to give you 1 more week. Otherwise, we're going to refer back to our usual suppliers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. They were not in contact with us. So they weren't giving us feedback on the profiles that we were even. So I was like, okay, this isn't actually a priority for you. No. This is something you've got to do. And so this is how do we begin? They were not invested. They were not invested. So what's your thoughts around that? So you're working with an organization, so both of you in your respective roles where the organization is trying to do its best. It's thinking through inclusion. It's thinking about how it can onboard Black heritage, diverse candidates, but then you're meeting these microcultures across the business that are academic, or don't really believe in it, or it's just a KPI?
Yeah, I think that what I would definitely say I see is that, and that talks about their culture. So where is the message coming from? The top, amazing. Everyone thinks that's great. The CEO, the founders on board. But if it's not flowing through to the hiring manager who's outside of the HR department, is the person that I place there or the person that's going to go there have a good experience? I doubt it, because they're more precious about time than they are about value. They can be the same thing, but actually, if your priority here is just to get somebody in the door, the person's not going to last. The person won't stay. They'll get there for all the right reasons, and that same attitude you have with what you just said will come through at some point.
Yeah,
and it won't take long. Everyone kind of gets comfortable after a couple of months of working somewhere. Do you know what I mean? That's when the real you comes out as an individual person in work, but also as an employer. That's when you get to see what's really under the rug. It's a shame, but how do you get that to flow through from CEO to everybody? You need to affect change, and maybe some people have to come and join and not stay to evaluate what's going on. It shouldn't take that, of course it shouldn't, but sometimes when people are leaving or sending a message, or people are unhappy, or engagement scores are low, these are the underlying things. It's not trickling from the top to middle management, senior management, and then throughout the teams. Because teams also, if you look at a team that's made up of 10 people and they get a new person, that person doesn't necessarily look like them. They may embrace it at the beginning, but then they might just change after that as well. Do you know what I mean? So it's not just management, leadership and CEO, it's everybody. If you feel as though you've been forced to take this person to your team, never had anybody in your team that looks like this, that's also a challenge that you have to face. And that's where you have, you need inclusion programs and education and how to show up to work and what it means and why. Why are you doing this now? Last 10 years we've been in business. We've never done anything like this. What's happened today? Well, we know the world is the world. So that's why we're doing it.
Which changed overnight, right? So it's only really the space of 3 years for most organizations. And Monique, I know you've got a different perspective on this, but it's really been the last 3 years that people have been faced with some really gripping conversations and had to take a really cold, hard look in the mirror at what equity looks like in their business. And as a recruitment business, we would never sit down in front of a CEO or chief people officer and talk about talent attraction without retention and development, because otherwise you've got a federated model of bringing in Black heritage or diverse leaders and then them suffering tissue rejection because the org and the culture is rejecting them, because actually we've not set up the structures, the process, the systems to really be the best host environment for that leader. Monique, so we were having a chat earlier and you were saying that actually this is something that you've been looking at for the past 10, 15 years in terms of addressing Black heritage and ethnically diverse communities from a public sector perspective.
Yeah, I was saying, I think looking at it versus genuinely wanting to change it, and what you said about hearts and minds, I think that's such a crucial barometer. That's the word I would use. And I think, yes, in public sector, you could argue that it's been looked at more. My background was in the NHS, and I think you've got the workforce race equality standard that's been about pre-2020. But looking at it, being told you have to report on it, being told you're going to be asked about it is very different to wanting to see true representation in your organisation, to wanting to ensure and understand how you can support your staff to have a great experience at work and feel part of the teams, like what you were saying, Sita. I think there's a real difference. And I think, the work that you do with organizations, I think is brilliant because, as you say, I'm not only talking about attraction and supporting you with that, you're really starting to help people to think about, and what is that experience going to feel like? Feel is the word here, and that's not, I'm not getting at warm and fluffy stuff. I'm talking about, we have to support organizations to measure on perception and feeling of staff. That is the game changer in feeling included. It's not metrics.
Yeah. And when you say warm and fluffy, it's okay to feel warm and fluffy. Warm and fluffy really feels good. Like really people say, oh, feels great. Fluffy this and warm. But actually, if it makes you feel warm inside, something's good. Something good is happening. So when you feel that disconnect, that cut, that harshness, that obviously it's not working. So I like the way you put it, but I would definitely call that warm and fluffy.
And I think I say it because when we talk about things, and we talk about public sector, we talk about standards, your mind goes to what you can measure, isn't it? And actually you can measure how people feel. You know,
Yes,
you can, but I think it's
important too.
yes,
right?
and that's it. You know, and it's an area where you may not feel as rock solid on the ground about. You know, I can't tell you it's 40%, 50%, 60%, whatever it is. People can't speak in that language, but actually really being able to understand and accept how someone tells you how they feel. We know there's so much studies out there. People do their best work when they feel like they are welcomed, that they are heard, and that they are, you know, that their work is valued. We know that. So if you connect warm and fluffy to that,
exactly,
your business is going to perform better.
Yeah. You feel safe at work. You feel like whatever you say is not going to be treated as a slight, or, you know, let's explore that. Let's, you know, no put downs. There's so many things at all the levels. I think sometimes people think when you get to a senior level, these things don't happen to you. You're in charge of the feeling now, but you are still as much a part of that community as the person who's an individual contributor.
I think it's more challenging, to be honest. I mean, Christina, tell us more, but I think it appears that it's more challenging if you're trying to parachute senior Black heritage talent into organizations, coming in at a very senior level, which is, I know, a lot of what you're being asked to do. That, for me, feels like it's even harder. You know, because if you are parachuted and then you don't have voice, but actually you're holding a very senior portfolio, that in itself is extremely demoralizing.
I completely agree. So I think it can be demoralizing if parachuted for optics into the wrong environment, where it's like, wow, we've got a shiny new CPO or CMO on our board. That can feel incredibly isolating. You've become the only lonely at the top, and you're carrying a conversation for your community. That's the worst way. I think some organizations are thinking through the succession planning a lot more now. And I think for historical reasons, we've come to this point that we've had to parachute, because we know that, you know, we are off the era pre-George Floyd, where really Blackness was a byproduct. We showed up to work, and of course, we wouldn't share the stories, the reality of what home was like for people in our offices. We masked a lot of that to assimilate. So code switch, that was just life until somebody kind of gave a name to it.
Like, that's what I've been doing for all these years.
That's what it was. Right, okay. I've only recently started to explain, you know, some of my story, and that, you know, that I've a very, very close member of my family that was often in and out of the judicial system. So on the weekends I'd be in prison in prison facilities, and then on the Monday I'd be in the boardroom of a FTSE 100, you know, expected to do my job, carrying all of that in the background. So this is something that we are so very, very used to, and I think that because historically we've not had the privilege of entering spaces, a lot of majority communities, or being promoted when it was time for us to be. We were kept in certain roles. So we stayed at head off instead of directors, stayed at director instead of partner. It means that there is a shortage. It's not a shortage of talent, but a shortage of acknowledgement and recognition amongst certain communities. So when we are out now looking for the talent to place into organizations, we have got to paint that picture, constantly putting the contextualizing, actually this person, their role here, they're head off, but they can do the director role.
Can I ask you a question?
Of course.
Do you find that you're having to do a lot of that selling in, a lot of that promotion conversation, so promoting into a new role, or hiring people who are currently head of into a role that is director, for example, where that client would not normally look at head of? You're having to paint that picture. What does that look like or feel like?
So they're called our wildcard candidates.
Okay.
So when we go to the market and we set ourselves up as a truly diverse and inclusive recruitment business, which means that we probably untap an extra 30% of the market, because we have networks. That means that we can go deep into the ethnically diverse market, the LGBT, socioeconomic backgrounds. It means that we have to storytell. And this is why it's so important that we exist, because prior to 2020, there weren't many executive search firms that were having this conversation for us or by us. So I was constantly being assessed by straight white men as to whether I could do a job or not. And so without the context, they were like, yeah, no, well, you've not gone to university.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
You've never been head
You
of.
the
You've
right
never
university.
been.
You
Yeah,
haven't,
I haven't. I didn't go to university. I left
Yeah.
school and started working straight away. So immediately, most of the companies that I work for now, I wouldn't be able to join their graduate program.
Right?
This is the story.
It's
I am the
crazy.
story. I'm a product of the problem that we try to solve as a business. So it's really important to give context.
Love it. Love it. I'm so grateful that you are there to do that, because I didn't get that. I always look at the world in two phases now. Pre-2020, when I was at work, because my business started after in 2019, and just thinking, gosh, if you were around when I was 25, who would I be today if your business existed, or if there was someone telling my story to my next firm, as opposed to, just taking a picture of me when I go into the agency, because I know that picture's then going to go and land on someone's and they're going to say, well, she's black, she's not going to get that job. That was the reality of 2020, or sorry,
pre-2020.
Yeah.
A client said that to me literally yesterday. I wish your business existed when I was younger, because I'd be in a complete different place now. And so it's great. But even the work that we all do, each of us collectively, I see it as not for now. I think that I would lose sleep if I thought that the work that I'm doing today would change overnight. This is for next. This is for the next generation, and those coming after us, because it's such a huge ask of us right now. And I spring out of bed to do it. I do. Inclusion is so important to me. But there is still a long, long way to go.